The Green Knight, directed by David Lowery, is the latest release from Studio A24. The retelling of a classic authorial tale, A24 is putting their well-known twist and interpretation of this legend to pretty interesting results. Now, A24 itself is somewhat controversial today. Many people like myself think they have put out some of the most interesting movies of the last decade. Others write them off as pretentious snobbery. But with recent hits like Lighthouse, Hereditary, Moonlight, Uncut Gems, Lady Bird, A24 has garnered quite a bit of respect. And this latest attempt by them I was fascinated by and intentionally did not learn too much about, because I wanted to go in completely blind to this interpretation of a very important tale from the history of fantasy. Starring Dave Patel, The Green Knight tells the story of an actual Christmas tale where an Arthurian, not yet knight, is challenged to a game by the Green Knight. He will give him a blow from his weapon, and in 1 year's time, an equivalent exchange will occur, and the Green Knight will deal back the same blow to our protagonist, Greene. The quickie spoiler-free review is, if you like A24 movies, you'll probably love this. I do, and adored it. This is the most emotionally evocative telling of an Arthurian tale I have ever come across, and is the type of interpretation I have been looking for a long time. Arthurian legends, to me, they're most interesting when you look at them in a very literal sense and strip away a lot of the Hollywood shine that we've seen glazed over in recent decades. It's not these glorious knighthood adventures, but instead basically a couple hours of psychological torture. Even like in these small moments where there could be something that comes across almost corny, like when Excalibur, our King Arthur's sword, is presented at one point, the room lightens a smidge, but that doesn't detract from a much darker vision for these Arthurian tales, though it's not grim dark. I don't want it to ever strike anyone that way. This is just a more gritty, without entering into that like Game of Thrones level grim dark, if you know what I'm saying. It stood true to the original, in my opinion, original writing back in the day of what these foundings of legends, as they were presented originally, were supposed to be, not in the Hollywood gloss we got for so many decades. Like, there's an aspect to this where it felt like the imagination of how someone who was told this story back when it was originally being told would envision it. I don't know if that makes sense or sounds crazy, but it really just struck true to me in that way. But no, it's not a horror film or even really a thriller. This is much more in line with a Lighthouse than a Hereditary. It's a experience. A lot is put into this movie just to pull out some emotion, some reaction from you. And I can see quite a few people saying this movie is overindulgent. There's a lot of stuff that just comes across as there for being there. I disagree. To me, almost every really kind of absurd or convoluted or twisty mental choice was really intentional in terms of having something to say about the story. For example, there's this one shot that pulls in as our protagonist is walking through this expansive landscape, and it just flips to the upside down. And I can see some people saying like that's just stylized whatever, but to me it was a reflection of what he was going through, his transformation. Like, you can read a lot into A24 movies, or you can choose to just kind of shrug it off as, it's too vague, it's not specific, it's a taste thing, but I loved it. My strongest criticism is going to be at the very end. The movie lost me a bit with one creative choice that was done, though I have a feeling if I rewatch it, I might actually love the ending. I'm not sure. This is a movie I'm going to rewatch several times and think a lot about. I would say this movie is at its strongest when it's not necessarily focused on the overarching plot and trying to reach some resolution, when the lens is more on just what this man is going through, the psychological challenges and changes. That is wonderful. And with the world building, it's just surprisingly good world building in my opinion. But yeah, it lost me a little at the end when it was forced to be more about the story, and then I just kind of was left going, But yeah, overall, amazing experience. Journey before destination. In terms of the tone and the experience of watching it, it's extraordinarily successful. This really feels like the best modern take on this kind of fantasy classic adventure we could get. You feel the main character go through it. He is miserable. He is beaten down, but there's also still this strange undertone of heart, of perseverance that does stay true to what the intent of an Arthurian legend like this is. I really loved that. The performances I found to be ranging from very good to excellent. Dev Patel is very impressive, and while I don't think he was the best performance in the movie, he kept my attention and made me feel for him the entire time. As an Arthurian legend fan, I really loved this interpretation of King Arthur. They didn't go with the kind of predictable twist on him, but instead made him really what feels like to me would be a later years mature, wise old king, King Arthur. And the Green Knight itself, wow. Really amazing looking creature design coming through spectacularly, but pulling away from that, there's also just this sound design and presence they've accomplished that is, oh, it's so enthralling. I mean, when you're the studio who's put out Lady Bird and Midsummer, you've gathered your audience. People know that you like to do a very close to the skin. That's kind of what I think of A24 the most. It's just the raw human emotion, and injecting that so successfully into something that is often presented in such a sterile way really worked here, and this was the perfect way to accomplish this film. I felt fear, I laughed, I was sad, I felt for the main character, and I resented him. There's an emotional gambit that was pulled out of me, and that's the point of cinema, right? And so it's a successful thing. I don't care if it maybe kind of hits you as a bit pretentious. If it's making you feel the things, even if you don't like necessarily what you're feeling, that's success for me. There's also this strong current that being truly fantasy that this movie leaned into. I was afraid with it being A24 they might pull back from. Yes, they've done supernatural, but it's always been kind of minimal or under to the story on top. Here we have a fantasy world, very much so the same one in the Arthurian legends, not minimized at all, really brought to life. And from there showing me giants to just small bits of magic, it was actually one of the most immersive fantasy world experiences I've had, almost in the leagues of that of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. It really never didn't feel like this was an ever-expansive fantasy world as our knight in training is navigating his way through it. And there's that factor for it feeling so big that I can't really ever put my thumb on how it's achieved, but it really was here, which was so necessary. Combine that with, of course, A24's never missing scores. The music was very much so enhanced by a sound design I felt to be more to the forefront of what I was receiving than I'm used to, but again, that kind of helped the world feel so much bigger and grander in a way. I was a bit distracted by some very stylized title cards that I personally wouldn't have made that choice. It bugged me a bit, but we're getting into so insane level of nitpicking there. It's not that big a deal. I'm sitting here wanting to think of more criticisms because I'm afraid people are going to say I'm just overly gushing, but this movie is really, really tailored for me. Hardcore. I love psychological stuff. I like fantasy. I like reimagining of classic tales. The performances were strong from actors I liked, and there's so many creative choices that kind of border into a lot of different tones that didn't miss at all. So yeah, screw it. I'm not going to worry about people thinking I'm being too generous. This is a 10 out of 10 for me, and probably my favorite ever movie adaptation of a Arthurian legend. And I know that's going to trigger my dad to text me like, you haven't seen blah 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 starring blah 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 from the blah blah blah. Your movies haven't aged as well as you think, and probably I've seen it because I had to watch a lot of those for school, and I don't like a lot of the original Arthurian movies. They haven't aged that great. Watch them again before you recommend them. Love you, Dad. I will say that's something that's very true for a lot of boomers. You don't rewatch the movies. You don't judge what the younger person's taste might be. You just recommend the things from your day and age and maybe think through what your audience is. But yeah, I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10. I loved it. Completely and utterly blew me away. Probably my favorite movie I've seen so far this year, and after so many things that struck me as very bland, like the latest Black Widow, it was just nice to see filmmakers really flex hard and show me something beautiful nearly every frame. I didn't even get into how beautifully this movie is shot. It's gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. Yeah, cinematography is on par with all these other A24 projects. Let me know what you think of The Green Knight in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.